Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this big guy right here. This is BladeShow West in 2019. I'm going to go ahead and just give a couple of thoughts here. My goal is to talk about some things I liked, some things I didn't like as much, and then highlight some of the makers and some of the people, frankly, who were pretty awesome to me. Pretty awesome, or just doing pretty awesome work is another way to be awesome to me. I mean, that's frankly the best thing you can do for me is just do something incredible, like, okay, I like you, we're in. So anyways, that's BladeShow West. And first off, I do want to thank the Blade Show folks. They not only helped me with things like getting me a media pass and whatnot, but were also just very kind and generous throughout the process here. It also made it possible for me to do the cutting competition, which was absolutely a freaking joy. So anyways, there you go. Size comparison, Spyticodelica. You can see that although Blade Show West was considerably smaller than regular Blade Show, and maybe a little bit bigger than the USN gathering this year, it is still substantially larger than your Spyticodelica. So let's talk about the stuff I liked about it, the stuff I didn't like so much, and then I'll highlight some of the makers and some of the people that were really awesome. On the good side, to start with, there was a lot of representation from the fixed blade crowd here. Let me look through this here, pull up the... So basically, the organization was that they have up here all the production companies, then they have a set of tables down here for custom makers, and then they've got over here a bunch of accessory and knife-making sorts of folks. It was a really nice idea. I like that organization, but they had a lot of really good representation and customs from the fixed blade crowd, as well as from the more traditional forged sort of world. A bunch of good kitchen cutlery sorts of folks, and although that's not my usual jam, it's nice to see that kind of thing. And frankly, I felt like this was maybe a little bit more of a forge-heavy show than the Blade Show in Atlanta, which focused a little bit more on stock removal knife making, as well as folding knives. And so I don't know, I like the vibe. It's not necessarily, I'm not saying, by the way, that I prefer that sort of thing to the folding stock removal stuff. That's still a joy. But it was a little different. I appreciated that. I don't know if they were going for that or if it was just accidental, but it was kind of nice. They also did have a number of big brands there. I mean, things were pretty well represented. You had like Spytico, you had Benchmade, you had a whole bunch of other folks in here. Medford was there, Leatherman, as well as We Knife had probably one of the biggest tables there, as well as Rayot. And then who else? Hogue was all there. I mean, there were a bunch of big brands there, and that was kind of cool, as well as a couple of relatively smaller brands, that you don't necessarily hear about as much, either trying to promote their new products or, trying other things. So that's kind of a nice thing. SOG was there, Rayot, did I mention? Anyways, I digress. There are lots of brands there, and there were actually a couple of new releases from the show, although nothing too, super exciting. A couple of other things. More than a couple. The organization of it was good. Like I said, I like the fact that they sort of put the factory of production knives up here, the custom stuff and the abrasives. And so as a result, this ended up being much more of the stabilized wood stuff. This ended up being much more the knife-making supplies. And although I wandered through there, and there were some exceptions, certainly. But it was a little bit more like, oh, okay, we've got... You kind of know where in the show you're looking to go. And that was very, very nice. Another thing I'll say, the contests were pretty excellent. They did a couple of them. They did a balisong flipping contest, which was kind of nice. And I appreciated that because it was sort of off to the side there, but it was a part of the main room. And although I could have done without the music that they were playing during each round, which was sort of nonsensical, it was cool to watch. It was scary as hell to watch because these guys are catching live balisongs like on their necks, which, dude... Do you want hemorrhaging? Because that's how you get hemorrhaging. Anyways, I digress. But they were all doing it on a stage, safely segregated away from the rest of the world. That was nice. And I will actually say that with the exception, like one or two little, jackasses, I was very impressed with the balisong safety. It seems like most of them were kind of located right over here in the squid ink zone. And so as long as you stay out of the danger zone here, you are by and large safe from the balisong people. They were off doing their own thing, and that was a great thing. I hope they can continue to offer sort of a safe flipping zone, and I appreciate Squid for stepping in and sort of offering that for the community. That was great. The kitchen knife contest was also a joy. I'm biased, though. I emceed that. Well, I was one of the two MCs for that. Mostly, honestly, it was sort of like, oh, well, I guess we're making this up as we go, but it was mostly making puns. Sorry about that. But it was a joy. Now, honestly, there were some very impressive knives and some very impressive knife skills. So, I did enjoy the contest. I will say, another thing that I liked about this is it wasn't the same, oh my god, everybody run atmosphere. There was a line on the Friday morning, for sure, but it wasn't like, oh my God, throughout the building, and there wasn't as much like doorbuster sorts of stuff. About the only thing that was there were the whole Blade Works. They actually brought a bunch of specters to the show, and, so a bunch of people were rushing over there, and they were swamped. They sold some ridiculous number of knives in like 30 minutes. But aside from that, it wasn't quite so like, oh my God, get in first to the poll, etc. And I appreciated that slightly more laid-back vibe. Of course, the best thing of any show is the people, because I enjoyed having a lot of good conversations with a lot of great people. I'm going to not name drop, but I had, some amazing talks, some amazing lunches, etc. People I talked to, you know who you are, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. And, this is a great time for me as a knife reviewer to actually chat with knife makers, to chat with people who know what the heck they're on about, and learn a little bit more from them and see, what do you think about this issue? Why did you design it in this particular way? And, although I might not always agree with it, like all the choices, it's nice to hear why they were made. That always brings me some joy. And so those conversations were great. But I continue to learn more and more about knife making, knife design, the knife market. And I really do appreciate the people who, were willing to share their time generously. I also want to say, for the folks who showed up to the after party pit thing and came and said hi and just introduced themselves as fans because I was there, Batman mask and all, that was a really wonderful thing. I appreciated that very much, and it was a real joy to meet all of you. I'm sorry if I've, forgotten your names, etc. from here, but nevertheless, you're absolute gems. Thank you for stopping by. And then finally, on the good side, this wasn't as frantic as the normal Blade Show was. I could linger. I could try things. I felt like, this size of show was much more easily digestible, so to speak. I felt like by the end of Sunday, I had done what I needed to do. I'd seen more or less everything, whereas with regular Blade Show, even just the custom tables, and considering that everything sells out in the first, 30 minutes anyways, which wasn't as much of an issue here, and I noticed a lot of makers doing the right thing by keeping some knives on their table that were sold and letting people pick them up at the end of the show, or maybe making people pick them up at the end of the show, or keeping some not-for-sale knives on the table. That seemed to be really good this year, and I want to see more of that. Thank you, makers. But anyways, I felt like I could linger, I could try things, I could chat with people, and I didn't feel like I was drinking from the fire hose quite as much as I did in Atlanta, where everything was not only so spread out, but where there were so many companies to deal with. So, to me at least, those are the good things. It wasn't as frantic as the Atlanta show, which is so much bigger. The people were awesome as always. There wasn't the same everybody-run atmosphere to get in. Contests were great. I think I liked the organization a lot. A number of big brands were there, and there was great representation from the fixed blade crowd. On the bad side, there wasn't as much folding stuff. As a primarily production folding knife guy, there were relatively few custom folding makers there. I mean, there were some, but they tended to be in the more traditional vein. And there certainly weren't. I mean, the Holtz. Well, okay, that's not fair. There were a number of makers who were doing folding fixed blades. That ain't a thing. Who were doing folding knives, but that wasn't really the main focus. And so some of the people that you would maybe expect to live in here weren't really in there. So that was one thing I didn't like as much. Another thing, Spyderco at Blade Show and as well as at the Gathering actually has a prototype case that they will sometimes bring. A glass case where they show off the fact that they've, these are some of the upcoming models. Of course, I can't talk about what's in that case because that's kind of the agreement, right, with the world. But they didn't have it here, and that was a little disappointing. That's something that's always a source of joy, and I can see somebody who went to the show being like, oh, damn, why not this one? It's a shame, but whatever, not a big deal. There were some other things missing, namely a bunch of big brands. It was kind of weird how few of the bigger brands, well, actually, it's not true, but there were some notable missing brands there. So, for instance, all of the European makers were more or less missing. There might be some exceptions that I'm forgetting about, and I'm sorry if I forgot about you, but by and large, they weren't there. But you also were missing a bunch of big production companies, like Cold Steel wasn't there, Hinderer, ProTech, Ontario, Steel Wheel, Kaiser, a bunch of folks just were completely, MIA from the show. And at some level, that makes it easier, because there were fewer people to go to, but at another level, I would have loved to have seen what Hinderer or ProTech were up to lately, And so, having those brands missing was definitely something that was a little disappointing. Again, I'm asking for the show to get bigger, well, praising the show for being small, but, that was kind of a thing. Next thing, this was held at the Oregon Convention Center. That was a great venue. I think I like it a lot, and frankly, it's as nice, if not a little nicer than the Cobb Galleria, because they sort of had one space for everything. The Cobb being, of course, where the Atlanta show is. But the pit, unfortunately, it lacked the pit, which is this area in the attached hotel. It's, pretty good for that. Now, look, I'm not necessarily, the pit room itself wasn't a problem, but the thing is, this time they did a pit party, basically, where they gave, they sold wristbands for this party, and then you could go down there, but the problem is, it was a little ways away. It was like a 20-minute walk or so away, and, although the venue itself was nice, it wasn't super easy to get to. They handed out bus passes, which is kind of nice, but considering that you're trying to get people with multi-$1,000 knife collections to go there, bring them, trade, buy, sell, etc., yeah, I don't see people getting on buses with Pelican cases. And so I'd like to have seen like either a shuttle or something, or just do it at the convention center. Just use another of the rooms there and have the pit be there. I feel like that would have been a lot nicer. And frankly, although the atmosphere was good, I don't see why they were making everybody go to this other venue there when, they could have just kept it there. So although I like very much the pit and I like very much the idea of having something like that, I don't know that it was implemented right here. Having it be a good ways away and accessible mostly by bus, not even like a shuttle or something, that wasn't necessarily ideal. Then finally, on the bad side, wearing a latex Batman mask for 3.5 hours is a really bad plan. As I told a bunch of makers, mistakes were made there. I really deeply regret not being Zorro or something like that, because then I'd just be wearing a blindfold or something like that. I had to do it, of course. I mean, at this point, it's a running joke, right? But oh my God, is that freaking hot. I was freaking dying under there. So, to me at least, that's the bad side. Latex Batman masks have their downsides in crowded rooms. Pit Party was a little bit far away. There were some big brands missing. Spyderco was missing the prototype case, and there wasn't as much folding knife representation, particularly in the custom world. So, there you go. Then, before I get into final, well, actually, I mean, okay. A couple of things, though, did really jump out at me in terms of what was there. I mean, one of the big questions people always ask me is like, Nick, what were you loving? What was really impressive? One of the things that was really impressive to me was a kitchen knife maker, actually, a guy named Firehorse Forge. He just does, well, kitchen knives, but he does really amazing work. His Soul Author Damascus was absolutely off the freaking shots. Really, really cool looking. These were knives where I can't buy an $1,800 kitchen knife. That's not, unfortunately, the way I work. But holy crap, was it tempting. They were really, really good. Next guy is Javier Voigt, or Vocht. I'm not quite sure how his name's pronounced. Dude's Argentine. Or whatever. He had some amazing, and I'm going to try and edit in some pictures over here. He had these amazing, amazing automatic knives with amazing details, with the finishes on them, like blued steels and things like that were just amazing. And it was all hand done, but it looked CNC. It was that damn perfect. His work was really, really, really good and very, very impressive. Another person who impressed me was a guy, the company is Berry Knives. I forget the guy's first name. But he brought one knife model to the table, but this was his very first knife model. It's this gigantic, big CNC guy. Absolutely intricately milled. Absolutely impressive. Although it's certainly not necessarily my style. It was absolutely like, wait, holy crap, this is your first knife? Really? This was another one of those makers who was just like coming out of freaking nowhere, like, wow. Okay, that's your first knife. I can't wait to see your second one, because that's going to be even better. I was very, very impressed with the work there. I mean, obviously, he's still working again, but still, damn, that was impressive. For his very first knife, that was great. Another thing that I saw there was the Holt Haptic. The Holt Blade Works, actually, I'll fetch my the charity Spectre for the moment. Holt Blade Works is a company you all know I like. They're the folks who make the Holt Spectre here. Really, really good stuff. They do some great, great knives. They had a prototype of their next model, the Haptic, on the table already, and well, that was a beautiful thing too. I'm not gonna do too much more reviewing on it because I want to spend a little bit more time with it, and I think they're making some tweaks. But nevertheless, that's That was very nice to see, and I'm excited about that. Another thing that was actually that I'd had before the show, but sort of I think this was its first launch or show after the launch, was the Monterey Bay Knives EWC. This is a slip joint flipper. It is a flip joint, if you will. Very, very cool little knife, and this was one of the ones where I'd seen it a little bit before the show because I, ordered one before the show. But it was one of the more impressive new releases there. Probably the best knife that I saw there, and the knife that came out of nowhere is actually this little guy right here. This is the Quiet Carry Drift. Quiet Carry's a brand I've reviewed before. They had the IQ, they had the West, the Strand, they had a bunch of stuff. But this is a knife that is on washers, which is nice. It has a blade that is Vanax, which is not a straightforward steel to find these days in production knives. It has a beautiful titanium handle, and it is, by the way, more or less rust-proof. It is very, very hard. Just this morning, I was sharpening this guy up a little bit, and holy crap is this steel hard. I was very, very impressed with that. It's a beautifully thin blade. Ergonomically speaking, it is absolutely stellar. This was one of those knives, and I believe this won Best Folding Knife or something like that from the show, and it makes sense. This is a really impressive knife, and although I'm going to do a full review of it, rest assured, and I've not spent too much time with it as my everyday carry because, well, I just got back from the show not long ago, but this was so clearly a best-in-show sort of thing that this is going to be a really impressive knife, and I was very, very happy to see it. I mean, thin grind, thin blade, complete. Anyways, I'm sorry, I'm fanboying a little bit, but this really came out of nowhere. It was just like the guy hands this to me. It's like, where the hell did this come from? Wait, okay, great, awesome, good job. And then finally, I want to highlight maybe the MVP of the show. And by that, I mean not necessarily the very best, maker or anything like that, but one maker that really actually helped me out a lot. Remember I was talking about that latex Batman mask? Yeah. So I'm at the pit party and I'm freaking dying over here because the Batman mask it leaves a hole for the mouth, right? But the problem is the tip of the nose does not, but it seals around the mouth. The tip of the nose does not have that same luxury. And so all the sweat is coming down my freaking nose and dripping off of me there. And this is a little graphic, but this is what happens when you wear a Batman mask. And so I was talking at the pit party to somebody, and then this young lady came and introduced herself. She is MCMD Hankery. I don't remember her actual first name. Sorry about that. They were MCMD. But I was freaking dying over there, and she opens up her satchel, basically, and says, hey, you want a Hank? And it was just like, I didn't think to bring one because I'm not a brilliant man, but it was like, oh, my God, yes, I don't have any cash for you. That's okay. You can pay me after the show. And the fact that I do appreciate a good bird-themed Hank. This Hank saved my freaking bacon. I was wandering around that place and just like, this was really helpful as a sweaty bastard in a Batman mask. So MCMD absolutely pulled off the MVP award. The Hank is absolutely fine too. That's a beautiful thing. But the fact that it was right there with a very generous maker, I appreciate that so much, MCMD. So anyways, those were some of the folks who jumped out at me. I think my best in show is probably the Quiet Carry, which was a very, very impressive piece. And on the custom end, probably Javier Voigt did some really cool work, but there were a lot of really great makers. So the big question is final conclusions. Would I go back to BladeShow West? Yeah, I think I would. We'll see if timing works out for me next year, etc. Because I do work. I have a full-time freaking day job, but I am glad I went out there. It was a very nice show. It was a little more calm. It was a little bit more focused. And you know what? I liked the contest. I liked kind of that approach. I think it was a very nice show. And I would absolutely consider going back to Blade West. If it works out, I would like to do that. And I think there's a role definitely for having the big, busy, oh my God, everybody busy running around sort of atmosphere of Blade Show in Atlanta. But I kind of like the laid-back approach here, and it made it a show that was maybe less, I don't know, it wasn't quite as like, oh my God, informative as the Blade Show with all the new releases and whatnot, but it was a lot more laid back and frankly a little bit more pleasant in that way. And I liked the convention center was great. And so anyways, there you go. That's BladeShow West. I hope this has been interesting to you, and that if you make it there next year, and I do too, that I get a chance to say hi, and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.